what I was expecting this comment section to be, but it wasn't this. I had 4 boys and decided that that was it. We weren't going to try for a girl. When my first granddaughter was 3, she turned to me out of the blue one day and said, Mimi, you know that I was supposed to be your daughter, but you decided not to have any more kids. What? My son told me I got very tired, so I became a baby. I said, what? He then said, I used to make fancy shoes, but I got tired and became a baby again. He was maybe 2.5 or 3. My son had emergency open heart surgery at 2 months old and spent 7 months in the hospital. I was only 3 years old when my great-grandma passed. About a year ago, I was scrolling on Facebook and saw a very old photo of me as a kid, and in the background, my great-grandma was there. He saw the picture and said, Mommy, that's my grandma. She held my hand and sang to me when I was having my heart surgery. My son was born within minutes of Michael Jackson passing away. He saw a picture of Michael Jackson when he was 3 and told me that man was singing to him when he was being born. That I'm fat. Who hasn't been told this by a kid? When we moved into our house about a year ago, my daughter and I were laying in bed. Husband was out of town, and she said, Mama, I can't sleep. I asked why she couldn't. She said, because there's a man outside our window. I said, a man? What does he look like? She said, he's tall and looks like a scary ghost. She has never seen any scary ghosts. We don't celebrate Halloween and barely watch any TV. And that's when I decided to open up my Bible and read Psalm 91 out loud. I asked her if he was still out there, and she said, no, he left. He's scared of us now. Ever since then, I make it a habit to read Psalm 91 out loud before we go to bed. She's almost 4 and she has the psalm memorized. She says it out loud randomly and I'll ask her if everything's okay. Sometimes she'll say yes. Other times she'll say something scared me, but it left. It's scared of me now. When we told our son I was pregnant, he was 4. He kept hugging and kissing my stomach, saying I was growing his baby sister. My husband and I tried to explain it could be a baby brother. We didn't find out the gender results because we wanted our son to find out at the 20-week ultrasound. The nurse finally said it's a girl and our son yelled, I don't know why we're even here. I've been telling you this all along. My 3-year-old told me that mommy has 2 babies. I had a miscarriage at 5 months before her. When I asked her, what do you mean? She looked at me and said, Mommy, you have 2 babies. Are you forgetting about my brother? My miscarriage was a boy. I laughed it off and asked her what's her brother's name. She goes, Carson, the name we chose for a boy. We never mentioned or told her. My husband passed when our youngest grandson was 2. They were visiting me and we realized we didn't know where my grandson was. We were looking at all the rooms and started calling him by his name, but he didn't answer. My son opened the door to the garage and he was sitting on my husband's Harley. To this day, we still don't know how he got up there because there was nothing around it. My son asked him, what are you doing? And he responded, I'm talking to Papa. And my son asked him, how did you get up there? He said, my Papa helped me. My grandson is now 19 years old. When I was young in the mid-80s, I had an imaginary friend named Wolfie. Me and Wolfie loved to play on the swing set. My aunt now lives on the same property in which I grew up and played with Wolfie a lot. My daughter, age 2, was swinging on a swing set at her house, same property and very close to the same location, and she was talking to herself. She never knew about Wolfie. In fact, it had been years since he was even mentioned. I asked her who she was talking to, and you guessed it, plain as day, she said, my friend Wolfie. Tell Marsha I said hi. This was a random kid I've never seen before. Marsha is the ghost that lives in my house. I haven't told anyone I know about her. What do you mean the ghost that lives in your house? I'm a teacher and I had a past student who, let's say, was different to say the least. I saw them one day and they gave me a hug and I told them I was going to have a baby. They stepped back and looked me up and down and said, it's a girl. I told them that would be great, but I didn't know yet. They looked at me strange and said, no, I'm telling you it's a girl. Sure enough, I was having a girl. At 34 weeks pregnant, I saw the same student and again they gave me a hug. They backed away and said, oh, you're going to have your baby this week. I told them it was too early for that, and again, they assured me I would. That was a Tuesday, and by Friday, I had given birth to my daughter. She's now almost 10. My son was 3 and had an imaginary friend he called Mr. Moose. He said they used to work at a store together where they sold money, and he would fly his plane to come visit him. Turns out my husband's grandfather's nickname was Moose. He worked at a bank, and he had a pilot's license. He died 25 years ago, and we never met him and knew none of this about him until he was talking to my father-in-law about him. He pulled out a photo album and my son picked him right out. We all had chills. He never mentioned him again after that day. My daughter had passed away before my niece was born. My daughter's birthday was 4/18. My niece looked at a picture of my daughter and said, we had a birthday party for her in heaven before I came down here. My niece's birthday is 6/1. It still gives me chills years later. Yeah. One night when my daughter was about 5, she had a nightmare and woke up screaming. I ran into the room to find her standing in the center of the bedroom floor with her eyes just staring and crying. I went up to her and I asked her what's wrong to try to reassure her, and she whispered to me, it's behind you. I was so afraid to turn around. I would have moved, like, to another home. My oldest daughter said to us as we were driving out of the cemetery, why is everyone dressed dressed so weird. There was no one in the cemetery. What? Told my son I was so grateful God chose me to be his mom, and he laughed and said, don't be silly, I chose you. God was right there and you looked sad, so I picked you. Kissed me and ran off to play. I was severely depressed before I found out I was pregnant. I had my 4-year-old son in the car with his baby brother about to go to the park for a picnic. Got to the end of the street and thought in my head, dang, I forgot about chips to go with our sandwiches and fruit. Without skipping a beat, my son says, it's okay that we don't have chips. I said, how did you know I forgot chips? And he said, duh, I read your mind. What? I had my first son and then a miscarriage and then my second son. My second son told me at 3 that he was supposed to have a sister, and so he would name his stuffy Ellie for me. We never told him that we wanted a daughter named Eleanor and call her Ellie. When my grandson was 4, he came up to me where I was sitting on the steps of the porch. I gave him a big hug and told him I loved him so much. He took my face with his tiny hands, looked me in the eyes, and said, I hope we spend our next life together. My mom unexpectedly passed away in May of 2019, and I found out I was pregnant with my daughter in February of 2020. When my daughter was around 2, her, my sister, and I were eating lunch, and she said, Grandma Shelley plays dolls with me, and she wanted me to tell you guys that she loves and misses you so much. We weren't even talking about her. When my nephew, who is adopted, was 3, my mom was telling him about how he had been born on his great-grandmother's birthday and her name was Baba. He said, I know her. I met her before I came down here. My 3-year-old tells me she doesn't want to be old again, cries real tears, says she wants to be a baby forever. Again? I was donating all my baby stuff after having 2 boys. My oldest, who was 7, said, don't do that. You'll have a girl in 90 days. I laughed and said, that's a fast timeline to have a baby. 90 days from that date, I had a positive test and I ended up having a girl. When we told the kids about the baby, my oldest said, well, I already tried to tell you. My grandfather passed away in 1997 at his home under hospice care. My daughter was born in 2002. We never talked to her about him. One evening when she was 3, my mother and I were going through old pictures asking her who was in them. I pulled out a picture of my papa and went to sit it to the side, and she said, that's Papa. I asked Mom if she had been talking about him in front of my daughter, and Mom said that she had not. I asked how she knew who he was. She said he plays with me. She would stay with my grandmother a couple hours during the day sometimes. They played together in the room he passed away in. She even showed me a silly face he would make, and it was a face he always made to the grandkids. We have tried for 10 years to conceive our last kid, and it never happened, so we just gave up. My autistic son comes up and hugs me and says, Mommy, you're going to have a baby. A week later, I test positive. Then before finding out the gender, he tells me that the baby is going to be a girl in pink and love Minnie Mouse. I asked how he knew that, and he says, I saw her with Wello and Wella, my grandparents, in heaven. My baby indeed was a girl, born this year, and the only show she'll watch is Mickey Mouse. My daughter is adopted. She came to us when she was 10 days old and has been with us ever since. When her adoption was final, we changed her birth name, first, middle, and last. She knows she's adopted, but we never told her what her original birth name was. One day when she was about 6, she was upset and I was hugging her and consoling her. I said, oh, Claire, you're fine. Let's take a deep breath. And she pulled away from me, looked me right in the face and said, my name isn't Claire, it's Elizabeth. That's her original birth name. Freaked me out. It's been 9 years and we have never discussed that. My brother-in-law's girlfriend's son asked me why my dad always sits next to me and he loves me very much. My dad died about a year or 2 earlier. They never met. I was scrolling through Facebook one day and someone posted a picture of my dad and he was next to me and yelled, stop, that's your dad. He loves you so much. My child never saw my great-grandma, died before she was born. At 2 years old, I decided to go through old pictures of her aunts and uncles so she could see us when we were little. She points to my great-grandmother and goes, that's my grandma Ruby. I go, how did you know that? Who told you that? She said, well, she comes and talks to me. When my son was 3 years old, I was playing the radio and he said, I miss the 80s. It was an all 80s station. Just before his 5th birthday, my youngest son woke up crying and repeated, I saw grandma. My mother died when I was 16 weeks pregnant with him. I showed him his 2 grandmas from my wedding album and asked him to tell me which grandma he saw. He pointed to my mother. It was a sweet moment knowing they had connected. During a family friend's pregnancy, her 2-year-old son had an imaginary friend named Lisa, constant companion. Friend birthed a daughter and named her Victoria, but when she got home, the son was sad because Lisa was gone. Friend renamed her daughter Lisa. My niece put her hand on my belly and said, you have a baby in there. It's very tiny. My sister and I laughed because I was 4 months postpartum and I still had a little belly from having a baby. I thought that's why she said it. I took a pregnancy test and my niece was right. I was pregnant. My youngest son was maybe 3 at the time, randomly told me while we were driving somewhere that his last mommy wasn't nice to him at all and that I was his favorite mommy. Within the past year, my 5-year-old son was sitting next to me on my bed and we were just relaxing. He looked at me and just started crying out of nowhere. I asked what was wrong and he kept saying I miss my first dad over and over. I asked again and again if he was talking about his daddy right now and he kept saying no. He missed his first dad and his first family. He told me his first daddy was such a good dad and loved him so much. This went on for about 2 weeks and he was so sad on those days he was missing his first family. He told me his first mom and siblings went to the grocery store and he was just with his daddy and then he came here to be with me. My grandfather was an optometrist and died in the 1960s. When my daughter was 3 or 4, we were at my grandparents' cabin. I could hear my daughter talking to someone upstairs. I went up and asked her who she was talking to, and she said the man who was making the eyeglasses. Seriously, what in the reincarnation is going on?